thing recorded. I'm learning more than I bargained for. But no, this is amazing. But Kelly, I'm sitting here thinking too, you're in Texas, and I don't think, as big as the state of Texas is and as many guests as I've had already, I don't think I've had anyone from Texas
You
yet,
haven't had
which
anybody from
is
Texas?
weird.
Shame on you.
No, I don't think so. Very weird, right? You would think like half my audience would be from there.
Well, Texas is big and beautiful, Chris, but my family resides, I'm originally from Iowa. And I've got a lot of family
Okay.
in Iowa, Minnesota, all over the Midwest. And so,
Okay.
yes, I love Texas, but there's also a lot of other states and culture and people to love out there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's very cool. If you are the first guest from Texas, awesome. That's an accomplishment for the Books for Guys podcast. But nonetheless, Kelly, super excited to talk with you. We've already I should have pushed record like 15 minutes ago because we've already talked about so many cool things that I think people will find fascinating. And I'm sure we'll kind of bounce back into them. But you've got a few books out actually in your career. You've been in the staffing industry for 20 plus years. You've owned your own firm. A lot of your books kind of stem from your professional experience, but you also speak and you do all these cool things. And come to find out, you are an author with Morgan James, which David Hancock, he was on the podcast back in, I think it was January, and I just had lunch with him. So small world, and I'm just excited to talk with
It is
you.
a small world, and I'm really happy that we connected, Chris. And yes, that is very cool that and that you were at the event with my publisher, David Hancock. I do admire him, and I know we were just talking about when I make business decisions, no matter what the business is or who I'm going to collaborate with, I like to go with people that are like-minded. You know, Nothing's perfect in life relationships or business relationships, but I'm very old fashioned on love your people, care about your team. I'm very big into culture. The world is never just going to be about me, Chris. It's about me and everybody else. And so, yes, I met David Hancock, um, you know, 2021. He chased me down on my book, Writing the Executive Roller Coaster, Medical Staffing Cases. And that book did win four trifectas when we launched it 2021 and two International Impact Book Awards. And the newest edition book it's a new edition off that book. It's a better edition. And it's through David Hancock and Morgan James, but he definitely has that. He cares about his authors. He takes a lot of time with his authors and he cares about people. So it was a really good match.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I can see that and why it would be a good match. And so, but Kelly, dive in a little bit. You've shared some stuff with me, but obviously you've got a few books out, but you've got a couple that really caught my eye when I was learning about you and just looking your profile up. I know In Good Faith is your latest one that's coming out this year.
Hmm.
And then you already mentioned one, Riding the Executive Roller Coaster, Medical Staffing Cases, which caught my eye because I'm in recruiting. I'm not on the medical side of recruiting, but familiar with, the industry and the way it works. But just tell your story a little bit about your career and then what led you to writing these two books in particular.
So I started my career. I started working when I was 15. That's what we did way back in the dinosaur days, right? But I always was, even as a young girl, extremely ambitious. I had two jobs in high school so that I could afford the Indianettes. So I kind of started at a very young age with my goals right over the way over the top. And that's kind of the way I was. Restaurants when I was 15 years old. And of course, I was a boss at 19, a restaurant boss. And, I would get I was right in the middle of my hotel restaurant business degree. So, I was a manager long before I had the degree. At a very young age, I just always felt like I needed to be 100 steps ahead of everybody. Then, of course, at some point in your life, you go backwards. Anyway, my first career was hotel restaurant, primary restaurant management for 10 years. I actually do attribute a lot of my education as a leader to the restaurant industry that taught me the basics of running the operations, staying out of legal trouble, making those results, troubleshooting operations. So that was my first career. At 30, I would move to a completely different career, but not really. I moved to staffing and recruitment, which would be my next baby. And actually, how I switched into that career, my first couple years were I was recruiting restaurant managers and executives with a company
Okay.
that I had actually used in my own career. And it's very scary to make that step because I moved from a salary, benefits to, okay, now you're 100 commission with no benefits, right? So I think it took my boss, Monica Bell, about 3 times offering me that job where I said, you know what, maybe I should try it. And I know, Chris, you have a background in staffing and recruitment. For some reason, it's a lot like sales. You either do really well out there or you don't. There's like one extreme to another. And I just happened to walk into staffing and recruitment and hit it from beginning stages and know that this would be my baby. A couple years later, of course, I married again. I did have an ex-husband that encouraged me. He's like, you know what? You need to go corporate and you need to go medical. And I said, why not? So that would be my learning curve. And I just happened to step into corporate. And you know what? It was a huge learning curve, because I had to work on my typing and I had to work on my computers and all the medical terminology. And, you got to be real careful. I even had for years, as I've trained my recruiters, told them, hey, you got to know what you're talking about before you get on that phone with medical professionals. Because if you don't, they're going to hang up the phone on you. So even if you had to look up, I don't care what department they're working in, you need to look up their job. You need to know some terminology so that you can have those open-ended conversations with them, and they have a little bit of reasonable trust that you know what you're talking about, right? So, yeah, staffing and recruitment. I am 26 years. I've the owner of KD Staffing now 19 years. Of course, I opened us. We would fall down. I would rebuild us. And current day, let's not talk about KD Staffing, all right? Because the market has some problems out there. I've stumbled along my path and I'm back to the year of challenges, Chris. Yeah.
That's staffing though. It's always this up and down
Mhm.
roller coaster. If you're in it long enough to be successful with it, you kind of understand you can't ever get too high, on those good years, and you can't ever get too low on the slow ones because it's just a constant. I can't think of a better
A
term,
roller
just roller
coaster?
coaster. It
Like
does
my book
everything.
writing executive roller coaster when I was talking about medical
It was the
staffing? Yeah.
perfect cover, perfect title.
Right, right. Up and down we go in life, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm sure maybe you've had those times in life too. Chris, I am a best-selling author. A lot of people will say, your life story is the perfect best-selling book or movie. Okay. But then I always stop them and I say this, you know what? The person, when it's real life stories and you're putting out you're the best selling life story, you realize you actually have to survive that story, right? You have to ride through the challenges and actually physically survive a story to tell it.
yep,
That's the tough
yep,
part. It's also
yep.
it can be very embarrassing, very hard to open yourself up to the readers and tell them this life story where they might be just shaking their head like, wow, man, that is really rough. And you know what? I've had some beautiful and blessed years, but I've also had those rough, tough, like, wow, you're still smiling, Kelly. And you are, at some point.
Yeah.
I've had years where I've had to ask God. I have a very big, deep faith, belief in God, and He does keep me going. But even in my second and third book, the readers love when a top executive goes homeless, right? They love those homeless chapters. But in that book, I would have never expected that I was going to be homeless. Nobody would have ever expected Kelli Christina to run out of money. And all these years later, I always ask myself, why, God? Why did that happen? And I think that, God humbles you. He sometimes puts you through the worst times so that you could learn. And I spent many years talking to our government officials about the underprivileged in this country. And Chris, I would have never learned. If I didn't walk in their path, I would have never learned what our underprivileged go through and how we could do better for them. right? I've even told the government officials, guys, most of the time it's guys, few gals, but guys, it's not that we don't care often, it's that we don't know. We don't walk in their shoes to know. Okay.
Yeah. No, that's a lot to unpack, and everything you're saying is true, and I always correlate this, and this is a big lesson. Just why Books for Guys was created was to share these type of stories. We say on this all the time. People write a book or you learn about somebody. You see the highlight reel a lot of times. Kelly, best-selling author, high-level producer, owns her own company and firm, but no one sees a lot of the times the struggle and those parts of you that you were at, had some of the lowest of lows in your life that you had to overcome. But I think that's what's so great to learn from is, hey, if Kelly can overcome that and do all that she's done and all that she's doing, well, okay, I can do it too. Or maybe what I'm going through is not that bad, put it in perspective. And so I love that you share that because I think it's important for people to listen and know that part of your story, because in one way it's motivating, in another way it's okay, she's human like the rest of us. It's a reminder, and we're not all perfect and we're not all sailing up here at the top all the
No, we're
time.
not. Most recently we've been talking about like 10% of our life is what happens, 90% is how we respond and handle it,
Yeah,
you know?
that's
And
right.
to say that life is perfect all the time, and I have had a heart, and I do have a very large network of people that I've both life coached and business coached in the past, right? I always feel like you're only going to sink down so far, before you begin to rise up again. But you gotta sometimes rebuilding or getting back up, it's not something where you snap your fingers and it just happens. This is a step price process where sometimes you're going one day at a time, 1 week at a time, one goal at a time. Even, the chapters, in good faith in writing the executive roller coaster when we're talking about those homeless. Okay, when you lose everything, lose your life, all right? And to actually step out of that, it really is a struggle. A lot of people will, I'm one of those advocates on you need to get the right help when that time is necessary. So if you need antidepressants or you need something for your moods on supplements or you need counseling or you need a support group, there are so many ways that you can help yourself out there. Don't be too proud. Don't wait until it's too late, right? And there are people out there that will act too proud. And there's so many different sources of help to get your mindset and your emotional stability back in life. So, yeah, I was not happy to be homeless. And that was what happened to my life. I'm a hero all these years later because I rebuilt, but that did not happen overnight. And by the way, something else that God taught me all these years later, I used to walk around for I don't know how many decades with 25 credit cards in my wallet, or, you're backing up the line on your purchases or whatever. That was the old Kelly Christina. The new Kelly Christina pays cash. She's got a very, very tight, simplistic budget. I'm happier with more of a simpler, still elegant life, but I really pay attention to my budget because speaking of what you're not going to have happen again. So my love for shopping, it got tightened up. It really did.
Yeah,
It
and I'm
was
sure a
like
lot of people need to know that.
tighten it up. Yeah, tighten it up and realize that we probably don't need to shop as much as, And you know what? When you have a career that can afford that, it's wonderful, okay? But I'm just saying the new Kelly Christina has savings. She tries to go straight cash, and if you don't have the cash, don't buy it. Right? Or keep less debt. You don't hear that very often. You keep your debt down. But there are so many ways that I am tight and in line with every expense line on my budget. Some people would say I'm a company tightwad, but and maybe I am. But I'm also a very generous person. I believe in paying it forward, and I'm generous in every area out there where other people forget. So, yeah, you can call me a company tightwad if you want, but I call it being smart with your budget. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Dope. And I think that's a good way to approach life and business. And again, something most of us all need to be better at. again, learning from someone who's walked through it like yourself and had to take some hard lessons. Maybe some of us can learn them a little bit easier without going through it by listening and paying attention to what you're saying.
Right. I mean, because
Kelly, talk a little bit about your new book, In Good Faith. What drove you to write it, and what's your message behind it? What do you want people to take away from it?
so just know, Chris, actually, you cannot buy Riding the Executive Roller Coaster anymore. It's no longer on the market. That book has been acquired by Morgan James, David Hancock, and we took that entire book and we made it better. And I say that because it's the same, but a better book. I had so many excellent reviews, but if I'm going to go ahead and spend a year, right, on a new project and we're going to put it out to all the bookstores, I'm going to take the very few reviews that we had that were not good or could have been better. And what I mean by that is a few more readers wanted to relate a little bit more to my character. And I suppose as an author, I'm a little bit more business and matter of fact, right? So we did edit it, add a few more scenes to draw people in. And hopefully, yes, it's the few people that have read it are already like, whoa, this is good, Kelly. This is good. But anyway, there's different personalities of both book projects. And I mean that because it is definitely a number one legal thriller. It's a crime drama. Some people will call it a novel memoir. It's an inspirational testimonial about a top executive, maybe borderline spoiled, and I could pick on myself, right? And the executive that falls down to homeless. But this starts with a very bad, very ugly, very nasty lawsuit in Texas that didn't have to happen, right? Where a lot of people from a staffing firm over the owner and an executive and some horrific decisions launch us into lawsuits. And, Chris, at the time, yeah, I guess you could call me, I was the influencer of the office. And everybody knew that if I didn't go along with the plan, and the plan was we lied to a Texas judge, right? They knew I'd be the first one in that office. The office meetings, you know what I'm talking about. We're going to go over the plan. And they knew if I did not go along with the plan, that my head would roll. And that's exactly what happened. And in this first very bad lawsuit, Chris, 85% of production and the team of recruiters would go away. There would be a couple homeless recruiters. And this is over a situation that is not your fault. You stand for honesty. You stand for justice. And you know what, Chris? I'm not lying to a Texas judge. I have too many attorneys that have kept me clean in business. I love God. I've had a life program, and the answer is no. Okay. So that office kept my money. And, since you are in recruiting, Chris, you would understand at the time we had non-competes. Right. And I knew enough about legal. And by the way, I had 4 attorneys surrounding me this whole first lawsuit. Right. But, even in the state of Texas, they say, Chris, oh, we don't honor non-competes, blah, blah, blah. That's crap. Okay. Because they are coming after you. Somebody's coming after you if they want to. Right. So anyway, in this particular bad lawsuit, I would make a decision. No, I'm not going to lie to a Texas judge. I'm not going to cover anything up. And, I could have stayed at that job and kept my money and my position. I just had to lie. And I was out. I was forced to quit. And so this is the story. It's highly dramatic. Chris, it does have my love life in there. It has, yes, I would honor my non-compete. I would not get my money. I would go homeless over not having a job. And then I would be forced to rebuild, And by the way, this first lawsuit would snowball into more and more court cases. Over a dozen law firms in Dallas were involved with all of this. All right. And it's also a story, and I say it's got a lot of personalities because my book project was number one in politics, government, legal for many years. And I mention that, Chris, because you don't wake up one day and you just know all the government officials. That's not how it happens. That's not how it works. Okay. The cases in this book would go from Texas I would bring them to Washington, D.C. They would come back to Texas and then, oh, by the way, bounce back to Washington, D.C. So most of our United States government knew about these cases, and I would learn from working with the government in a higher channel of legal Sometimes legal will bounce back and forth from state to federal because, yes, it's a federal problem, right? It affects all of the country, but a lot of times you have to look at the states and the businesses in those states and those laws. So there would be a ping pong effect, right? And so, anyway, lots of different juice in those stories, in the chapters. You will see a female with a sword on In Good Faith. And I most recently been blogging about, I dedicate the female warrior with the sword to the Texas attorney that in 2017, and mind you, we were 7 years into legal battles. She said, please, Kelli, please, can we put the sword down? She's like, we're just so tired, Kelli. All right. We're tired and we're wore out. But you know what, Chris? I got the sword and I'm keep moving forward. Right. So I would put the sword down and I would send the original litigation book to Donald Trump in 2018. And of course, he knew about it. He knew about it. His campaign knew me many years. And he had a letter to me, in 10 years. He had a letter to me in 10 days, right? But I had already learned to file all of this into federal investigation. And of course, I'd already sent a letter to multiple government offices. And the note was this: government, United States government, you will not forget medical staffing and the laws that I'm wanting to change and what I advocate. So that's how I would get to know the government, and I would start working with our Texas, congressmen and senators. And that's the story. The medical industry would
That's
often call me a medical lobbyist. I'm here to help. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to fight on the greedy laws and the wrong laws. And with the people that are out there that are fighting and advocating, any type of changes, you have to look at the bigger group of people and what kind of changes are better for everybody.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's incredible, Kelly. And just to think, you're the one that's been stepping up to the challenge to try and generate and create change, and just how many people have gone through these situations and not taken the step to try and do that. How many people have been affected negatively? And it takes a lot of courage for somebody like yourself to go out on that limb, and it could not end well potentially, with the people you're dealing with and trying to take on. And so just an incredible path and journey you've decided to go down, and to see what's all going to come from it, and all of that. I can't even fathom, because I've never really experienced any of this, as in my space of recruiting personally. But just to hear your story and what that's all entailed, I'm just mind blown, to be honest.
With every book that you put out, or I believe you have a new legacy or a vision, or what do you want to see? My book is definitely something that's, been chased for the filming industry for a good couple years and everything. But the new legacy for In Good Faith, or what I had in mind and envision, is, read this book, but I advocate, learn more legal upfront. Teach our great leaders to do better. Okay, read the book. It's great, drama, and it's definitely a juicy story. And by the way, Chris, there are parts of that book that are very dangerous. I walked through some danger and I risked my life in this country, okay? But read the book, and as a leader, don't copy any of these bad business decisions, okay? Let's teach our young, or especially when they're out with our business degrees, they want to be managers, they want to be directors, executives, CEOs, entrepreneurs. Fantastic. But let's educate them to do better. And let's not make these type of decisions that destroy an entire office. Because leadership is a lot of responsibility, Like, Chris, I know how to fire people in my sleep. I know how to fire people nicely, okay? That's not what I'm talking about, letting people go that can't do the job. I'm talking about bad decisions as an executive, boss, owner, whatever, that hurt your entire team to the point your team loses and they're out homeless, and they're out of jobs. Then you hurt them, you hurt their lives, you hurt their loved ones. Let's not do that. So you know what, before you open that business, before you take that big boss job in whatever industry, look at the legal, because a lot of people don't. They look at legal when it's too late, and they're in trouble or their operation is in trouble, and then they got to drag in the attorneys and clean it up,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. And it's very, from what I understand, costly, brutal. There's just so much to it that you don't want to. I don't wish it on anybody. I've
No,
never been through it, but I've
no.
heard enough stories to where it doesn't sound like a pleasant thing to go through by any means. And I'm sure your book also, highlights that. But Kelly, your book is out now, right? People can purchase this book now.
That is a great question. We are out for pre-order right now, which means
Cool.
yes, I've been advertising. I think now going on 5 months, and the official pub date for the bookstores will be July 2nd. But it is all over. You can pre-order with Barnes and Noble, and you do get a free ebook. And Chris, in the matter of what I have done in my past, I did open KDC Making a Difference 18. My longest term now retired attorney actually surprised me, and he opened it on Valentine's 2018. And the reason why is I was always his favorite client. He always won his cases. He thought it was very strong and reputable out there. And he thought I was an example, a strong, great example for the United States legal system. So he did open us on 18 Valentine's, and it's books and public speaking. And that is what I'm working, my focused energy. Of course, I work a night job and everything else right now. I'm always wearing multiple hats, but that is a focus right now. And so I only bring it up because it would only make sense, speaking of why, I picked David Hancock and Morgan James, a portion of all my book proceeds will go with Habitat for Humanity, and that is out there. It would only make sense that, for me, yeah, sure, I'm very competitive. I would love to, far excel and beat, on the book sales and everything, but it's not just about the book sales. It's about sharing those proceeds and making a difference out there.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we have links and everything in the show notes so people can go pre-order and find your book and support good causes along the way. And we'll do our part in promoting that as well for you, Kelly,
Thank
and
you.
excited to do that. I want to end this on a high note,
Okay.
and I want to, I don't want to give too much more away because I want people to go read your book and learn about this and really get ingrained to what's been going on. But, when people, and you've had some people pre-read it already and you've gotten some things from it, but I guess my question is, as people read this book, what are you hoping is accomplished? What are you hoping people take from it? What action would you like to see people do with it? What's your vision for this book and what do you want to see come from it?
That is a very loaded question right there, Chris. For years and years and years, my book projects were predicted to put me in a very big election. Okay. It's not really a hidden factor for anybody that I try to make a difference out there. But, for me right now, it's just simplify it. I've kind of had to simplify steps and say, you know what? I'm just trying to make a difference and educate people out there. I think in our country, we hide a lot of problems. These court cases remained hidden, right? And the problem with hiding problems in this country, Chris, is that we don't get anything fixed. Right? I mean, you've got to expose problems, and it's just, the general public and knowledge of how bad it can be out there. And then why in your heart and in your legal team's heart would we push so hard to change some of our laws? It's so less people get hurt, you know? And so it's just a wider, I'm stumbling on my words on why I would put this book out. All right. But we did. Yeah. And at some point, the government officials, we had the fresh 225-page litigation book. They thought I was going to be their boss someday, and that's honorable. Chris, it's honorable, but we put out the story on how would I start working with our government officials. And it's out there. And it is juicy. I absolutely, positively, it was predicted before I even put those books out there to go into a best-selling movie, which would be fantastic. I loved, I've always been a huge fan of Hollywood. So I don't know, maybe it's that. I wanted to put out a real-life story that would turn into a movie. There's a lot of different answers I could give you, Chris. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. Well, and again, speak what you want to into existence. Who knows what's going to come from this? And like you said, as a person of faith, you just go with the flow and see what happens. The right things will fall into place at the right time. And now that we have connected, and you are now, part of the Books for Guys journey and story too, it'll be something that I personally follow closely, and others that listen, I'm sure will be very interested in reading your book and following what you continue to accomplish in your life and career. And so, but Kelly, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this,
It
and we'll have
has.
to do it again, especially as you continue your work.
If you want to chat again, I would take an open invitation. Chris, whether we're talking about men reading or females reading, we both could stand to read more. Yes, this is a juicy, dramatic business legal book. That's a big wow. And, it's a reason why CBS followed me around for 4 years, or the contents of what was going on in that book. But also, Chris, there are some amazing books out there just for mindsets, right? And the way we think, and to train us in business. And so, yes, it doesn't love that you're advocating men read more, but you know what? So could females. There's so many self-help books, right? There's just a lot out there, and I'm a very big believer in bettering yourself. And you can educate and better yourself through a lot of reading, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the message. And yeah, while it's called Books for Guys, I'm trying to get us knuckleheads out there to read a little bit more and be better leaders and tackle our personal development with a little more intention. It is a lot of people can benefit from listening to this and finding books, and it's been a real joy to have female leaders like yourself on the podcast. And a lot of
Okay,
our
but
listeners are female
Chris,
too. So it's for everybody.
you got to remember, yes, I'm the female leader in this book, and yes, this was my life story, but there are a lot of male heroes in my book. So don't forget, you're only as great and as big as your team and your people. About 5 years ago, I'll make this quick, but I was getting grief about, why we're why did I have an all male legal team? And I had never really thought about it. But the first thing I think is, oh, you don't want to discredit not one of my men on my legal team, whether you're talking about paralegal, security, my attorneys, they're all men. I'm sorry. They're the type of men that while I was out there swinging my legal fist, they stuck with me. All right. They were courageous, they were brave, and they were staying with me. We were staying in the fight together. So let's not discredit the male heroes in my book, because there's a lot of them. There's some, I made name to some government heroes. They happen to be men. So anyway, long story short, yes, I'm the main character, but we have a lot of men and female heroes in my book. We do.
That's
Yeah.
right. And shout out to all of them. And
Right.
so,
Right.
but thank you so much, Kelly. This has been fantastic.
Chris, I've really enjoyed our connection, and just want to wish you a beautiful week.